I knew something was wrong the moment I heard my own name spoken like I wasn't in the room. "She's been forgetting things," my son said, calm and confident, the kind of voice people trust without question. "It's getting worse. I think it's time I step in before she makes a serious mistake." I stood just outside the glass office door, my hand still on the handle, listening to Mitchell Klein explain my life to a stranger like I was already gone. Then I saw it, the folder on the desk. My folder, the one with the land papers. My land. And suddenly, none of this was about my memory. I walked in slowly, like I hadn't heard a word. The banker smiled too quickly. Mitchell froze for half a second, then recovered, that practiced look sliding right back into place. "Mom, I was just—" "I heard enough," I said, taking a seat without being asked. I placed my handbag neatly on my lap, like I always do, like someone who forgets nothing. My eyes went straight to the folder. He noticed. Of course he did. And that's when I knew this wasn't concern. This was timing. "Hello, my dears. You ever notice how quickly care turns into control the moment money gets involved? At 76, they start speaking over you like you've already faded. I don't like this at all. Not one bit." Mitchell cleared his throat and tried again, softer this time. "Mom, we're just trying to make things easier for you. You've been a little off lately." A little off. That's what he called it. Not the fact that I still balance my accounts down to the cent every Sunday morning with a cup of Darjeeling and my old brass calculator. Not the fact that I could tell you exactly where every document in my house was filed. No. A little off. I looked at the banker. Did I request any changes to my accounts? He hesitated. "Well, no, Mrs. Klein, but your son mentioned—" I didn't ask what he mentioned. Silence. Clean and sharp. Mitchell shifted in his chair. I could feel the pressure coming off him now, subtle but desperate. He hadn't expected me to push back this early. That told me everything I needed to know. My eyes returned to that folder again. "And why?" I asked calmly. "Are my land documents sitting on your desk?" This time, he didn't answer right away. And that pause, just a second too long, was the moment the truth stepped fully into the room. I didn't press him right there. Not yet. People like Mitchell don't break when you confront them head on. They adjust, twist, redirect. I had seen it before, just never aimed at me. So I let the silence sit a moment longer. Then I smiled, small and polite, like none of this had weight. "Oh, that," he finally said, tapping the folder with 2 fingers, too casually. "We were just reviewing options, future planning." Future planning. For my land. Without me. I nodded slowly, as if that explanation made perfect sense, even though every instinct in my body had already started pulling threads together. "Strange," I said, adjusting my gloves. "I don't recall asking anyone to review anything." The banker shifted again, clearly wishing he were somewhere else. Mitchell leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were sharing something delicate. "Mom, this is exactly what I mean. You don't always remember the conversations we've had." There it was. Not loud, not aggressive, just placed carefully, like a stain you only notice once it's too late to clean. I turned my head and looked at him properly then, not as my son, but as a man sitting across from me, building a case. His eyes didn't waver. That bothered me more than anything. "I remember this conversation perfectly," I said, "because it's the first one we're having about it." Another pause. This one tighter. I stood up, smoothing my coat. "I won't be making any changes today. If I decide to review anything, I'll do it myself. Mitchell stood up too quickly. Mom, you're being defensive. I'm trying to help you. I picked up my handbag. Then start by asking. I walked out before he could answer. The air outside felt colder than it should have. I stood on the steps of the bank for a moment, letting the wind settle me. Then I began to walk. Not home. Not yet. I needed distance first. Physical, mental, emotional. Because something had shifted, and I needed to see it clearly without him standing in front of me, shaping the picture. As I moved down the street, I started replaying everything, the small corrections. Mom, you already told me that. The gentle interruptions. Let me handle it, it's easier. The concerned looks exchanged with Paula when they thought I wasn't paying attention. At the time, I let it pass. Age teaches you to ignore certain irritations. But now, laid out in order, it didn't feel like concern. It felt like preparation. By the time I reached the corner cafe, the one with the chipped blue tiles and that ridiculous saffron pear tart they charged too much for, I had already made one decision. I would not confront him again until I understood everything. I took my usual table by the window and ordered tea, not because I was thirsty, but because routine steadies the mind. Darjeeling, 2 minutes steep, no sugar. The girl behind the counter smiled at me like she always does. No hesitation, no pity, just recognition. I wrapped my hands around the cup and let my thoughts settle into something sharper. Mitchell had access to my schedule. He knew when I'd be at the bank. That meant this meeting wasn't spontaneous. It was arranged, planned, positioned, and the folder. That was the part that wouldn't leave me alone. My land wasn't just property. It was 42 acres on the edge of a development line that had been creeping closer for years. My husband and I held onto it through every offer, every downturn, every "you'd be crazy not to sell." We didn't keep it out of stubbornness. We kept it because timing matters. And suddenly, my son is discussing it without me. Which meant one thing. Something had changed. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages I hadn't paid much attention to before. There it was. A notice. Something about zoning adjustments. I remembered skimming it, thinking I'd look at it later. Later had arrived. I opened it fully this time and read every line. Halfway through, I felt it. Not panic. Not even anger. Clarity. The kind that settles in your chest like a quiet bell. The land wasn't just valuable anymore. It was about to become very valuable. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly, watching people pass by outside, none of them aware that my life had just tilted into something else entirely. Mitchell didn't think I was forgetful. He needed me to be. And that meant whatever he was planning had already started. I took another sip of tea. Calm now. Completely calm. And for the first time since I stood outside that glass door, I allowed myself a small, almost imperceptible smile. If he wanted to play this carefully, so would I. I didn't go home right away that day. Instead, I went somewhere I hadn't needed in years. The old filing cabinet in the back room of my house, the one Mitchell always joked, looked like it belonged in a museum. Heavy oak, slightly warped from humidity, and inside it, every important paper of my life, arranged in a system no one but me had ever fully understood. I unlocked it, slid open the bottom drawer, and pulled out the folder marked Land, Original Deed. The paper still smelled faintly of dust and time. My husband used to say land like this wasn't owned, it was held. "We're just its caretakers for a while, Lenora," he'd tell me. No, not Lenora anymore. I corrected myself softly. Margaret. No. I stopped. Names didn't matter right now. What mattered was what I had in front of me. 42 acres, survey lines, old boundary notes, access points, and tucked neatly behind it, every offer we'd ever declined. I sat down slowly and began laying everything out across the table. Deed, tax records, correspondence. My fingers moved without hesitation. No confusion, no gaps, just memory, clean and exact. Forgetful. I almost laughed. Then I took out the notice from earlier and placed it beside the deed. Zoning revision. Commercial expansion corridor. Infrastructure approval pending. I read it again, slower this time, and something new revealed itself between the lines. Not just value, but urgency. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was movement. Quiet, official, already in motion. Which meant buyers would already be circling. Which meant offers wouldn't just come, they would compete. And that meant Mitchell didn't just suspect the land had value. He knew. I leaned back in my chair, letting the realization settle deeper. This wasn't about helping me manage things. This was about getting control before the number became real. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. The house was silent, but not empty. Every corner held something I recognized, something I remembered placing there. A porcelain bowl from Lisbon, a chipped enamel kettle I refused to throw away, a small tin of cardamom I hadn't opened in months. Nothing about me was slipping. But something about him was accelerating. I returned to the table and picked up my phone again, this time not to read, but to act. There was one name I hadn't called in years, but I remembered it clearly. I scrolled through my contacts until I found it. Sabine Holloway. She had handled a legal dispute for us nearly a decade ago. Quiet, precise. The kind of woman who listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, things moved. I pressed call. It rang twice. Sabine Holloway. Her voice hadn't changed. Sabine, I said, steady. This is Len. I stopped myself again, then continued without correcting. It's me. I need to review something. Privately. A pause. Not confused. Not hesitant. Just measured. I remember you, she said. When do you want to come in? Tomorrow morning. Then I'll clear it. That was all. No questions. No small talk. I ended the call and set the phone down. Then I reached for another name. Reed Talbot. This one took me a second longer to find. Not because I forgot, but because I hadn't needed him before. I had only heard of him through someone my husband trusted. A broker who didn't waste time and didn't play games. The line connected after 3 rings. Talbot. I was told you handle land sales discreetly, I said. I handle them properly, he replied. Good enough. I have 42 acres just outside the west expansion line. That got his attention. A slight shift in his breathing. Barely noticeable, but there. I'll need details, he said. You'll get them, but not yet. A pause. Then, understood. I ended that call too. Now the room felt different. Not heavier, sharper. I gathered the papers back into their folder, aligned every edge, and returned it to the cabinet. Locked it. Checked it twice. Then I stood there for a moment, one hand still resting on the wood, and let the full shape of it come into focus. My son had already started moving pieces. He thought he was ahead. He thought I was reacting. I turned off the light, stepped out of the room, and closed the door quietly behind me. He wasn't ahead. He was early. And that's a very dangerous place to be. I arrived 10 minutes early, not because I was anxious, because I wanted to see who else might be there before I stepped in. Old habits. You learn more from a room when you're not the center of it yet. Sabine Holloway's office hadn't changed. Same restrained decor, same muted tones, same quiet that made people lower their voices without being asked. No receptionist chatter, no background noise, just order. Good. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and she was already waiting. Sabine stood up, extended her hand once, firmly, then gestured toward the chair across from her desk. No unnecessary warmth, no performance. Just presence. "You said privately," she began. "I meant it," I replied, taking my seat. "Everything we discuss stays between us unless I say otherwise." "It already does." I studied her for a moment, then opened my bag and placed the documents on the desk. Not all of them. Just enough. Deed. Zoning notice. A copy of last year's tax statement. She didn't touch them immediately, just looked. "Tell me what you think is happening," she said. "Not what is happening. What I think." I appreciated that. "My son is positioning himself to take control of my finances," I said plainly. "He's already started implying I'm mentally declining. At the same time, he's discussing my land with third parties without my consent." Sabine's eyes flicked to the zoning notice. "And you believe those two things are connected?" "I don't believe in coincidences that come with paperwork." That earned the smallest shift in her expression. She picked up the documents then, one by one, scanning them with a speed that told me she had done this thousands of times before. No wasted motion. No commentary until she had the full picture. When she finished, she placed everything back down in a neat stack. "Your capacity is intact," she said. "There's no legal ground for him to assume control unless you give it to him, or unless he proves you're incapable." "He's working on the second," I replied. "Yes," she said quietly. "That's what this looks like." No sugar, no hesitation. "Can he do it?" I asked. "Not easily," she said. "But if he builds enough narrative, statements, witnesses, small incidents framed the right way, it becomes a process. Slow, unpleasant, and invasive." I let that sit for a moment. "And the land?" She tapped the zoning notice lightly. "This changes everything. If the corridor expands as expected, your property becomes extremely attractive. Not eventually, now." I assumed as much. "Then assume this as well," she continued. "Anyone who knows this will move quickly, including your son." There it was again. Clean, direct. I leaned back slightly. "What would you do in my position?" She didn't answer right away. She watched me instead, as if measuring whether I was asking out of fear or strategy. "Do you want to keep the land?" she asked. "No." That surprised her. I could see it, just for a second. "I want to control the timing," I added. "And the outcome." That was the correct answer. She nodded once. "Then you move first," she said, quietly. "You prepare everything legally before he understands what you're doing. You remove any informal access he might have, accounts, documents, influence points, and when you act, you do it completely. No partial steps." I folded my hands in my lap. "And if he pushes before I'm ready?" "Then you become very difficult to manage," she said. "Document everything, communicate clearly, never appear confused. The moment he tries to formalize anything, we respond." "We." I noticed that. "Good," I said. She reached for a notepad. "I'll start by reviewing your current legal structure, wills, accounts, permissions. If there's anything he could use, we close it. There is one more thing, I said. She looked up. I want it done without noise. A slight pause. That includes him, I added. Sabine held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. Then we worked quietly. I stood, gathering my documents, but leaving copies she had already made without me noticing. Efficient. At the door, I stopped. If anyone contacts you about me, family included, you don't confirm anything. I don't discuss my clients, she said, even indirectly. Her expression didn't change, especially not then. I inclined my head once and stepped out into the hallway. The air felt different now, not uncertain. Structured. I walked out onto the street and didn't pause this time. There was no need. The shape of things was clear. Mitchell had started building a story about me. Now I would build something else entirely. And when it was finished, his version wouldn't matter. I didn't tell Mitchell where I was going that afternoon, not because I was hiding, because I was done explaining myself. I drove across town instead, past the familiar streets, past the places that still held versions of my life he thought he understood, and stopped in front of a narrow building with dark glass and a brass plaque that read, Talbot Land Advisory. No decorations, no promises. Just a name. I stepped inside. Reed Talbot was exactly what I expected. Mid-60s, composed, the kind of man who doesn't waste energy pretending to be impressive. He stood when I entered, gave a short nod, and motioned toward the chair across from him. You said 42 acres, he began. I said I would confirm that in person, I corrected gently. That earned me a brief, almost invisible smile. Then let's confirm it. I placed the documents on his desk. This time, more than I gave Sabine. Not everything, but enough to show I wasn't guessing. He reviewed them in silence. No small talk. No attempts to fill the space. Just eyes moving, page by page, slower than Sabine, but with a different kind of attention. Less legal, more instinctive, like he was mapping value in his head. When he finished, he leaned back slightly. You're sitting on a pressure point? He said. I assumed as much. Most people don't, he replied. They hear development and think in years. This? He tapped the zoning notice. This is already late. Late. That word settled in differently. How many buyers? I asked. Enough, he said. But not all of them are the same. Explain. Some will try to move fast and quiet. Others will drag it out and negotiate you down. A few will understand exactly what this is and come in strong from the start. And you? I position you so they compete, he said simply. No performance, no pitch, just structure. I folded my hands. Discretion matters. It always does, he replied. But I'll say this clearly. If anyone else already knows about this land in detail, especially someone with a personal connection to you, they may try to interfere. I'm aware. His eyes held mine for a moment longer than necessary. Family? He asked. Yes. He nodded once. No curiosity beyond that. Professional. Then we move carefully, he said. I'll need authorization to begin outreach, but I won't initiate anything until you give the word. Good, I said. Prepare everything. Quietly. He slid a single sheet across the desk. Preliminary terms. Clean. Direct. No hidden language. I didn't sign it. Not yet. I'll review this, I said, placing it back into my folder. Of course. I stood, but before I turned to leave, I added one more thing. If anyone contacts you about this property without going through me, I don't engage, he finished. Not even to acknowledge. Not even then. That was enough. I stepped outside, the late afternoon light catching the edges of the buildings in a way that made everything look sharper than usual. And for the first time, I could see the full shape of what I was doing. Legal structure, under Sabine. Market positioning, under Reed. Information, under me. Mitchell had started moving early, thinking speed would give him control. But speed without awareness is just noise. I got into my car and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. There was one more piece left. Access, not legal access. That was already being handled. Personal access, the kind that doesn't show up on paper. I took out my phone and opened my banking app. Joint visibility settings, emergency contacts, authorized conversations. Small things. Quiet things. The kind no one notices until they stop working. I began reviewing each one, slowly, carefully, making notes instead of changes. Not yet. Timing mattered. Because once I started, there would be no version of this where I stepped back. I closed the app and set the phone down. Mitchell thought he was preparing to take control. What he didn't understand was this. Control isn't taken in one moment. It's removed in many. And I had just started counting. The offer came 3 days later. Not by mail, not through some drawn-out negotiation. A call. I was in the kitchen, slicing a blood orange, slow, precise cuts, the way my husband used to do it, when my phone rang. Reed Talbot. I let it ring once more before answering. Yes. I have interest, he said. No greeting, no build-up. Serious interest. I set the knife down carefully, wiped my fingers on a cloth, and leaned lightly against the counter. Define serious. A group tied to the corridor expansion. They don't want delays. They don't want complications. They want control of that land before anyone else understands how far this project is moving. And the number? A pause. Not hesitation, calculation. 1.67. I didn't react. Not outwardly. But something inside me settled into place with a clarity so sharp it almost felt physical. That's their first position? I asked. Yes. Then they're afraid of losing it. Another pause. Correct, he said. Good. That told me everything I needed. They want it clean, he continued. Fast closing, minimal exposure, no public noise until it's done. That works for me. I'll prepare terms, he said, but I need confirmation you're ready to move. I looked down at the cutting board. The orange lay open, bright and precise, every segment intact. Timing matters. I'll confirm soon, I said. Not yet. Understood. The line went quiet. I ended the call and stood there for a moment, the kitchen suddenly too still. $1.67 million. Not theoretical, not potential. Real. And Mitchell had been sitting in that bank office, talking about my memory. I let out a slow breath, then reached for the knife again and finished what I had started. Small things first. Always. Because once this moved forward, everything would change. That evening, he came by unannounced. Of course he did. Mitchell never liked uncertainty, and I had given him too much of it. I heard his car before I saw him. The door opened without knocking, the way it always had, like this house was still an extension of his. Mom? In the kitchen, I replied. He stepped in, scanning the room quickly. Not consciously, just habit. Looking for signs, disarray, confusion. Something he could use. He found none. Thought I'd check on you, he said, leaning casually against the doorway. You seemed a little tense the other day. I was interrupted, I said calmly. That tends to do it. A flicker of irritation passed through him, gone just as quickly. I've been thinking, he continued, stepping closer, about what's best moving forward for you. Of course you have. I placed a small plate on the table, arranging the orange slices neatly. Have you? Yeah, he said. And I think we should simplify things. Consolidate your accounts. Make sure nothing slips through the cracks. Nothing slips through the cracks. Such a careful phrase. I sat down across from him, folding my hands. And what exactly do you think is slipping, Mitchell? There it was again. That almost imperceptible pause. You've been repeating things, he said. Forgetting small details. It's normal, Mom. It happens. Name one. He blinked. Just one thing I've forgotten, I said. Silence. Then he shifted, trying to regain control of the direction. It's not about specific examples, it's about patterns. No, I said quietly. It's about evidence. The word landed harder than anything else I'd said so far. He straightened slightly. I'm trying to help you. I know exactly what you're trying to do. That stopped him. For the first time, truly stopped him. The air between us changed. No more soft concern. No more careful language. Just two people, looking at each other without pretense. And what is that? He asked. I held his gaze. You're moving too early. He frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said, leaning back slightly, my voice steady. You started building something before you understood the full picture. His jaw tightened. I don't know what you think is happening, he said, sharper now. But you're overreacting. Am I? Yes. I reached for one of the orange slices, took a slow bite, and let the silence stretch just long enough to unsettle him. Then I said, almost casually, Tell me, Mitchell, when were you planning to mention the land? Everything in him stilled, not dramatically, not visibly, but enough. And that was all I needed. Because now I knew. He wasn't just guessing, he was already involved. I set the plate down, untouched slices still perfectly arranged between us. And for the first time since this began, I saw something new in his expression. Not confidence, not control, concern, good. He was starting to understand. This wasn't going the way he planned. He didn't answer my question, not directly. Instead, Mitchell leaned back, slow, controlled, like he was recalibrating. That was always his instinct. Never rush when something slips, just reshape the moment. I don't know what you're implying, he said. Calm again, careful again. But if this is about the property, I was going to bring it up. I just didn't want to overwhelm you. Overwhelm me. I almost admired the restraint in that choice of words. You were going to bring it up, I repeated. At the bank. Without me. That's not what happened. No? I tilted my head slightly. Because I seemed to remember you explaining my mental condition while sitting next to my land documents. His jaw tightened again. You walked in at the wrong moment, he said. You didn't hear the full conversation. I heard enough of it. Silence stretched between us, heavier now. Then he leaned forward. Look, he said, dropping the softness completely. This doesn't have to be complicated. The land is valuable. We both know that. And if you try to handle this alone, you're going to make mistakes. Big ones. There it was. Not concern, control. I didn't interrupt. I can manage it, he continued. I have the connections. I understand how these deals work, and more importantly, I can protect you from getting taken advantage of. Protect me. From what exactly? I folded my hands, resting them lightly on the table. And in return? He blinked. Just once. What do you mean? I said evenly. What do you get, Mitchell? His expression shifted, subtle, but there. I'm your son, he said. I get to make sure you're taken care of. That's not an answer. Another pause. Then he exhaled through his nose, irritation breaking through the edges. Fine. You want honesty? This affects all of us. It's not just your future, it's the family's future. And yes, I'd be involved in managing that. Managing, of course. And if I say no? His eyes locked onto mine. You won't, he said quietly. That was the moment. Not loud, not explosive, but definitive. Because in that single sentence, he showed me exactly what he believed. That this was already decided. That I would bend. That I always had. I sat there for a second longer, letting that settle into the space between us. Then I stood up. I'm having dinner tomorrow, I said calmly. You and Paula can come. 7. He frowned slightly, thrown off by the shift. What does that have to do with anything? Come, I repeated. Or don't. I picked up the plate of orange slices and moved to the sink, rinsing it under warm water, like this conversation had no weight at all. Behind me, I could feel him watching, trying to read what had just happened, but there was nothing for him to read. Because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was placing pieces. 7, he said finally. Then he left. The next evening, they arrived exactly on time. Of course they did. Paula carried a bottle of wine she knew I wouldn't drink. Mitchell walked in like he belonged to the walls, familiar, comfortable, still under the illusion of control. The table was already set. Not casually, precisely. 3 plates, polished cutlery, linen napkins, and in the center, a dish of slow-braised lamb with rosemary and something sharper beneath it, something most people wouldn't recognize unless they paid attention. Sumac. Unusual, but deliberate. We sat. For a few minutes, everything was surface level. Small talk, polite exchanges. The kind of conversation people use to delay what they actually came for. Then Mitchell set his glass down. We should talk, he said. Then talk, I replied. Paula glanced between us, already sensing the shift. Mitchell straightened slightly. I think we need to move forward with formalizing things, he said. Legally, just to avoid complications later. There it was, out in the open now. What kind of formalizing? I asked. Power of attorney, he said. Temporary, just until everything with the land is settled. Paula nodded faintly, like this was all reasonable, all normal. I looked at them both. Then I asked very quietly, Have you already spoken to someone about that? The silence that followed was different. Not uncertain. Exposed. Paula looked at Mitchell. Mitchell didn't look at her. He looked at me and didn't answer. That was enough. I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. Then let me be very clear, I said. And I meant every word that came next. Now this is the moment I've been waiting for. He didn't just think about control, he already started the process. That silence? That's guilt, plain and simple. Tell me honestly, what would you do sitting at that table right now? I will not be giving you control of anything, I said. No hesitation. No softness. Just truth. Mitchell's expression hardened immediately. You're making a mistake. No, I replied. You did. Paula shifted, trying to step in. We're just trying to make sure everything is handled properly. Without me? I asked, turning my gaze to her. She stopped. Mitchell leaned forward, voice lower now, tighter. You don't understand how fast this is moving. I held his gaze. I understand exactly how fast it's moving. And that was the moment he realized. I wasn't behind. I was already ahead. He didn't argue immediately after that. That would have been too obvious. Instead, Mitchell leaned back again, slower this time, like he was forcing himself to stay composed. But I could see it now. The tightness in his jaw, the way his fingers pressed just slightly too hard against the edge of the table. He was recalculating. Paula was the first to speak. "Margaret, we're not against you," she said carefully, her voice soft, measured. "We're trying to make sure nothing goes wrong. These kinds of deals, people get taken advantage of all the time." I turned my head toward her. "Do I look like someone who's about to be taken advantage of?" She hesitated. Just long enough. Mitchell stepped in before she could answer. "This isn't about how you look, it's about risk." "Whose risk?" I asked. No answer. Of course. I reached for my glass, took a slow sip, and set it back down with deliberate calm. "You've already spoken to someone," I said. Not a question. Mitchell didn't deny it this time. "We explored options," he said, "just to understand what might be needed. Without informing me. We didn't want to alarm you prematurely." I let out a quiet breath. Alarm me. The word almost made me smile. "And what exactly did you tell them?" I asked. "This someone you consulted?" He didn't respond right away, which meant the answer mattered. "That you're starting to forget things," he said finally. "That you might need support making decisions." There it was. Out in the open now. Paula shifted uncomfortably beside him, but she didn't interrupt. I studied him for a moment, really studied him. This wasn't panic. This was commitment. He had already crossed the line in his mind. "So you're building a record," I said quietly. "It's not like that." "It is exactly like that." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was clear. I stood up slowly and began clearing the plates, not because I needed to, but because movement changes dynamics. It forces the other person to follow your rhythm. Neither of them spoke. Good. I carried the dishes to the sink, rinsed them one by one, the sound of water filling the space where their explanations used to be. Then, without turning around, I said, "You should stop." Mitchell's voice came immediately. "Stop what?" "This," I said, drying my hands. "Whatever version of this you think you're building." I turned back to face them. "Because if you continue—" I let the sentence hang for just a second. "You won't like how it ends." Paula's expression changed first. Not fear, understanding. Mitchell's followed, but slower, less willing. "You're threatening me now?" he said. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm informing you." Another pause. Then he stood up. Not abruptly, not aggressively, but with finality. "I'm trying to do the right thing," he said. "You're making that difficult." I met his gaze. "No," I said. "I'm making it impossible." That landed. I could see it. Paula stood up as well, more cautiously. "We should go." "Yes," I said. "You should." They moved toward the door without another word. But just before Mitchell stepped out, he stopped, turned back, and said, quieter this time, "This isn't over." I held his gaze. "No," I said. "It isn't." The door closed behind them. The house fell silent again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had weight. Direction. I walked back into the kitchen, finished drying the last plate, and set it neatly into place. Then I reached for my phone. No hesitation now. No more waiting. I opened my banking settings first. Access permissions. Emergency contacts, advisory visibility. One by one, I removed him. Every trace, every pathway, no alerts sent, no explanations given, just gone. Then I opened my messages. There was one from him already. "We need to fix this." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened another thread. "Read." "I'm ready," I typed. Then Sabine. "Proceed." I set the phone down on the counter and stood there for a moment, letting the stillness settle around me again. This time, it didn't feel uncertain. It felt precise. Because now everything was in motion. Not his version. Mine. And the difference between the two was going to cost him everything. The next morning, everything looked the same. Same kitchen. Same light falling across the counter. Same quiet hum of the refrigerator. If someone had walked in, they would have seen nothing unusual. No signs of conflict. No visible shift. That's how these things work. The real changes happen underneath. I made my tea the same way I always do, Darjeeling, 2 minutes, no sugar, and sat by the window with my notebook open. Not because I needed to write anything down, because writing forces clarity, and clarity was the only thing that mattered now. At exactly 9:12, my phone rang. Mitchell. I let it ring, then stop, then ring again. Persistent. That too hadn't changed. I answered on the third call. "Yes." "Mom, we need to talk," he said immediately. No softness this time, no performance. "We already did." "No, we didn't," he snapped. "You're shutting me out and making decisions you don't fully understand." I took a slow sip of tea. "I understand them perfectly." "No, you don't," he said, voice tightening. "And you've already started doing things behind my back." That made me pause. Not because I was surprised, because I wanted to hear how much he knew. "Like what?" I asked calmly. A beat. Then, "My access is gone." There it was, clean, direct. I leaned back slightly in my chair. "Yes," I said. "You removed me," he continued, "from everything." "Yes." Silence on the line, but not empty silence, the kind that fills with realization. "You had no right to do that without discussing it with me," he said finally. That almost made me laugh. "No right?" I repeated. "Mitchell, it's my name on every account." "That's not the point," he said sharply. "The point is, you're isolating yourself and making it harder for anyone to help you." Anyone. Interesting word. "Is that what you call it?" I asked. "Help?" "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what I call it." I let a second pass, then another, and then I said, very quietly, "Tell me something honestly." He didn't respond, but he didn't interrupt either. "If the land was worth nothing," I continued, "would we be having this conversation?" Silence. Longer this time, long enough to answer. "You're twisting things," he said eventually. "This isn't about the land." "Then what is it about?" Another pause. Then he exhaled, frustrated now, losing control of the rhythm. "It's about making sure you don't ruin something that affects all of us." There it was. Not me. Not my well-being. Not my stability. The outcome. The money. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, not in frustration, but in confirmation. Because now it was complete. Every piece in place. "I won't ruin it," I said. "You already are," he replied. "No," I said. "I'm just not sharing it." That hit him harder than anything else. I could hear it in the way he stopped speaking entirely for a second. "You think you can just cut me out?" he said finally, quieter now, but more dangerous. "I already did." "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand exactly," I said. "Better than you." His voice dropped. Then explain something to me. Go ahead. How did you even know? He asked. About the land, about the timing. There it was. The question he actually cared about. Not control, not access. Information. I smiled slightly, though he couldn't see it. I read my mail, I said. Silence. Then something shifted. Not just frustration anymore. Concern. Real concern. Because now he understood something he hadn't before. I wasn't reacting to him. I had moved independently, and that meant he was no longer ahead of anything. You're making a mistake, he said again, but it sounded weaker now. No, I replied. You keep repeating that. Because it's true. No, I said calmly, because it's the only thing you have left to say. Another long silence. Then finally, this isn't over. I didn't respond right away. I let that sit. Then I said, you're right, and ended the call. I placed the phone down gently and looked out the window again. The street moved as usual, cars passing, people walking. Nothing had changed out there, but everything had changed here. Because now, he knew. Not everything, but enough. Enough to understand that whatever he had planned was no longer in his control. I picked up my notebook and wrote a single line. He's reacting now. Then I closed it. Because the moment someone starts reacting, they've already lost their position. And Mitchell had just realized he was no longer directing anything. He was trying to catch up, and he was too late. The closing was scheduled for Thursday, 11:30 a.m. Private office. No public listing. No drawn-out negotiation. Just signatures, transfers, and silence. Exactly how I wanted it. I arrived 15 minutes early. Not to prepare, to observe. The building itself was unremarkable, clean, discreet, the kind of place designed to leave no impression. Inside, everything moved quietly. No raised voices, no wasted motion. Reed was already there. So was Sabine. They didn't greet me like someone fragile or uncertain. No soft smiles, no guiding gestures, just a simple nod from each of them. Ready. Good. I took my seat, placed my bag beside me, and folded my hands on the table. Documents were already laid out, structured, precise, final. This wasn't negotiation anymore. This was execution. Everything is in order, Sabine said. We've reviewed every clause. There are no vulnerabilities. Reed added, buyer is ready. Funds are secured. Once you sign, it moves immediately. I nodded once. Let's proceed. The first document slid toward me. I read every line, not because I didn't trust them, because I don't skip steps. Not now, not ever. My signature came steady. Clean. Exactly the same as it has been for decades. Page after page, no hesitation, no doubt, just movement. Halfway through, the door opened. No knock. Of course. Mitchell. He stepped inside like he belonged there. But something was different this time. Not confidence, urgency. How did you... He started, then stopped himself, eyes moving across the room, taking everything in. Me, the documents, Sabine, Reed. Understanding hit him fast. Too fast. You're actually doing it, he said. I didn't look up immediately. I finished the page in front of me, signed it, placed the pen down. Then I raised my eyes to him. Yes. He stepped forward. You can't just... I can, I said calmly. This is a mistake, he snapped. You don't even know who you're dealing with, what they're offering, what you're giving up. I know exactly what I'm doing. His voice sharpened. No, you don't. And you've shut me out of the entire process like I'm some kind of outsider. You are. That stopped him. Clean, immediate. He stared at me like he hadn't expected that word. Not from me, not here. I'm your son, he said, lower now. and this is my decision. Silence. Heavy. Then he turned slightly, addressing the room now. Has anyone here actually confirmed she's capable of making this decision on her own? There it was. Out loud. No more careful language. No more subtlety. Sabine didn't even look at him. She is fully competent, she said. And this meeting is not open to third-party interference. Mitchell's jaw tightened. You don't understand what's happening here. Reed finally spoke. We understand perfectly. That was enough. Mitchell turned back to me, frustration breaking through completely now. You're cutting me out of something that affects all of us. I held his gaze. No, I said. I'm protecting it from someone who tried to take control of it. That's not what I was doing. It is exactly what you were doing. He stepped closer. You're going to regret this. I picked up the next document. No, I said quietly. You are. And I signed. This right here, this is where everything flips. He walked in thinking he could still stop it, still push, still take control at the last second. But it's already done. Tell me, would you have even let him in the room? The final document was placed in front of me. Transfer authorization, completion. I read it once, then again. Then I signed. Sabine gathered the papers immediately, passing them across the table. Reed confirmed the transfer with a short call, his voice low, precise. It's done, he said, just like that. No applause, no reaction, just finality. I stood up, adjusted my coat, and picked up my bag. Mitchell hadn't moved. He was still standing there, frozen somewhere between disbelief and calculation. How much? He asked finally. I paused, looked at him. 1.67, I said. His expression shifted. Not surprise, something else. Realization. Because now, it was real, and more importantly, it was no longer his. He took a step back. Just one, but enough. I walked past him without another word. No hesitation, no glance back. Because there was nothing left in that room for me. Everything that mattered, I had already taken with me. He didn't follow me out. That was the first thing I noticed. Mitchell always followed. Always pushed the conversation past its natural end, as if persistence alone could bend outcomes in his favor. But this time, nothing. No footsteps behind me. No voice calling after me. Just silence. I stepped outside into the midday light, adjusted my coat, and paused for a brief moment. Not out of hesitation, but to let the moment settle properly. It was done. Not almost done. Not in progress. Done. I walked to my car, placed my bag on the passenger seat, and sat there for a second longer than usual. Not thinking, not replaying anything. Just still. Then my phone buzzed. One message. Mitchell, we need to talk. Now. I looked at it. Didn't open it. Set the phone down and drove. By the time I got home, there were 3 more messages. Then a call, then another, then silence again. That silence lasted exactly 47 minutes. Then the front door opened. No knock. Of course. He walked in fast this time. No calm entry. No measured tone. Where is it? He said immediately. I closed the cabinet I was standing in front of and turned to face him. Where is what? The money, he snapped. Where did it go? Straight to it. No performance left. Somewhere safe, I said. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the room, then turning back to me. You moved everything, he said. Every account. Every access point. I can't see anything anymore. Yes. You locked me out. Yes. His voice rose slightly. You had no right. I had every Right. Silence. Sharp this time. Because now there was nothing left for him to soften, nothing left to reinterpret. Just facts. He stepped closer. Do you have any idea what you've done? I do. No, you don't, he said. You've created a situation you can't manage on your own. I already have. That's not how this works, he snapped. There are taxes, structures, legal exposure. You think just because you signed papers, it's over? No, I said calmly. I think because I planned it, it's handled. That hit. Harder than anything else so far. Because now he understood something he hadn't allowed himself to consider before. This wasn't reaction. This was design. You didn't do this alone, he said, narrowing his eyes. Who's advising you? That's not your concern. It is if they're manipulating you. I almost smiled. There it is, I said quietly. Now I'm being manipulated. Because this doesn't make sense, he insisted. You don't just wake up one day and restructure everything without input. I didn't wake up one day, I said. I was paying attention. Another pause. Then something shifted in him again. Not anger this time. Pressure. Real pressure. You've put me in a difficult position, he said, voice lower now, tighter. I watched him carefully. How? He hesitated. Too long. Then, there are things you don't know. That was new. Then tell me, I said. He exhaled slowly, like he was deciding how much to reveal. I've already made commitments, he said, based on this. There it was. Finally. Not concern, not protection, expectation. What kind of commitments? I asked. Financial ones. Specific. He looked away for a second, then back at me. Investments. Agreements. I moved things forward because I knew this was coming. Because he knew, not hoped, not planned, knew. And you didn't think to include me in that knowledge? I asked. I was going to, he said quickly. Once everything was in place. Once everything was in place. For him. I nodded slowly. I see. You've put me in a very bad position, he repeated. No, I said. You put yourself there. That's not fair. It's accurate. His voice sharpened again. You're going to let me take the fall for something you're benefiting from? I held his gaze. I'm not taking anything from you, I said. I'm just not giving you what you assumed was yours. That landed. Clean. Final. He stared at me for a long moment, something unsettled moving behind his eyes now. Because this was the part he hadn't prepared for. Not resistance, not refusal. Consequences. You don't understand how this affects me, he said quietly. I stepped a little closer. Then you should have thought about that, I said, just as quietly, before you started building plans with something that wasn't yours. Silence. Heavy. Complete. And for the first time since this began. Mitchell had nothing left to say. The house felt different after that. Not tense. Settled. Like something had finally aligned the way it was supposed to. Mitchell didn't come back the next day. Or the day after. No calls. No messages. Just distance. I didn't chase it. I had more important things to finish. At exactly 10 a.m. on Monday, I sat down again with Sabine. This time, there was no urgency in the room, no hidden pressure. Just structure. Now we stabilize, she said, opening a new set of documents. I nodded. The sale was done. But what came after mattered just as much. Maybe more. Walk me through everything, I said. And she did. Tax allocation, asset protection, distribution timing, structures designed not just to hold money, but to keep it where it belonged. With me. Every decision was deliberate, no rushed signatures, no assumptions. We adjusted account layers, removed exposure, reinforced ownership in ways that didn't just block access. They erased the possibility of interference entirely. Clean, quiet, final. When we finished, Sabine closed the folder and looked at me for a moment longer than usual. "You handled this correctly," she said. "Not praise, recognition." "I handled it early," I replied. "That's why it worked." I stood up, gathered my things, and left without anything more needing to be said. That afternoon, I made one more stop. Not a lawyer, not a broker, family, but not Mitchell. I drove across town to a small house with a garden that was always slightly overgrown in a way I secretly admired. Wind chimes near the porch, a ceramic bowl filled with polished stones by the door. Clara opened before I knocked. "Grandma," she said, surprised, but not confused. Never confused. "Hello, darling." She stepped aside immediately, letting me in without questions. That alone told me everything I needed. Inside, the house smelled faintly of something sweet. Cinnamon, maybe, and something sharper underneath. Star, anise. Unusual combination. I liked it. We sat at her kitchen table, and for a few minutes, we didn't talk about anything important. Just tea. Just presence. Then I placed a folder on the table. Her eyes dropped to it, then back to me. "What is it?" she asked. "Something I want you to have," I said. She didn't reach for it. Good. Instead, she asked, "Why?" I held her gaze. "Because you never once treated me like I was disappearing." That landed differently than anything else I'd said in days. Her expression shifted, not into gratitude, not into excitement, into understanding. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "Yes," I replied. "You did." She opened the folder slowly. Inside, documents. Structured, clear, not excessive, not overwhelming, intentional. Her breath caught slightly, but she didn't speak right away. "I don't expect anything in return," I added. "This isn't a transaction." She looked up at me. "I know," she said, and I believed her. That was the difference. We sat there a little longer, not discussing numbers, not discussing outcomes. Just clarity. Then I stood up. "You'll take care of yourself," I said. "And you," she replied. "I already am." That evening, I returned home. The house greeted me the same way it always had. Quiet. Familiar. Mine. I placed my keys down, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. No rush. No noise. Just the absence of interference. For the first time in a long while, everything was exactly where it should be. Not because it happened, because I made it happen. And somewhere, I knew. Mitchell was still trying to figure out how everything slipped past him. But the truth was simple. It didn't slip. It moved. Without him. He came back 4 days later. Not in a rush this time. Not unannounced either. A single knock. Then another. Measured. I was in the living room, reading. Not because I needed to, but because routine has a way of revealing intent. I closed the book, placed it carefully on the table, and walked to the door. When I opened it, Mitchell stood there without the usual posture. No forward lean, no assumption of entry. Just standing. "May I come in?" he asked. That was new. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around like he was seeing the house differently. Not for what it was, but for what it no longer gave him. We didn't sit immediately. That, too, mattered. "I've been thinking," he said. "I assumed so." He nodded once, then took a breath that didn't quite settle. "I handled this wrong," he said. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because apologies, when they come late, need space to prove what they are. I shouldn't have gone behind your back, he continued. I shouldn't have spoken to people without you. And I definitely shouldn't have framed things the way I did. Framed things. Careful wording. Still protecting himself, even now. I watched him for a moment longer. Sit, I said. We moved to the table. Same place as before. Different weight. I'm not here to fight, he added. No, I said. You're here because your position collapsed. That landed immediately. He didn't deny it. I'm under pressure, he admitted. There it is, I said quietly. He exhaled slowly. I told you. I made commitments. Yes. And they didn't just disappear because you cut me out. No, I said. They became your responsibility. He leaned forward slightly, frustration pushing through again. You're acting like this doesn't affect you. It doesn't. That's not true. It is, I said calmly, because I didn't build anything on assumptions. Silence. He looked down at his hands for a moment, then back at me. I need help, he said. Finally. Not control. Not influence. Help. With what? I asked. Stabilizing things, he said. Buying time, covering gaps. I held his gaze. And why would I do that? He hesitated. Longer than before. Because now, there was no obvious answer. I'm your son, he said finally. I nodded slightly. Yes. That was all. No expansion. No softening. Just acknowledgement. And that means nothing to you now? He asked. It means something, I said. Just not what you think. He leaned back, tension building again. I made mistakes, he said. I'm admitting that. You're admitting consequences. That's not fair. It's accurate. His jaw tightened again. I'm trying to fix this. No, I said. You're trying to reduce the damage. That hit harder than anything else, because it was true, and he knew it. We sat there for a moment, the air thick with everything that had already been said, and everything that didn't need to be. Then I spoke. You didn't just make a mistake, I said. You built a plan that required me to be weaker than I am. He didn't interrupt. You needed me to forget things, I continued. To hesitate. To rely on you. A pause. But I didn't. Another pause. And now your plan has no foundation. He looked at me, something unsettled in his expression now. Not anger, not frustration, recognition. I misjudged you, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. Silence again. Then he asked almost carefully, Is there any version of this where you help me? I didn't answer immediately. Because this was the real question. Not about money. Not about control. About consequence. I leaned back slightly, studying him. Not as my son, not as someone who had hurt me, but as a man standing at the edge of something he created himself. Then I said, There is a version. He stilled, listening. But it doesn't look the way you want it to. His expression tightened slightly. What does it look like? I held his gaze. You take responsibility for everything you've done, I said. No adjustments, no excuses, no rewriting it into something softer. He didn't respond. You fix what you can, I continued, without expecting anything from me. A pause. And maybe, over time, we see what's left. That was it. No promises, no guarantees, just terms, real ones. He sat there, absorbing it. Because this wasn't negotiation anymore. This was reality. And for the first time since this began, he understood that I wasn't something to manage. I was something he had to face. He didn't answer right away. That was the first honest thing he'd done since he walked in. No quick response. No adjustment. No attempt to reshape my words into something easier to accept. Just silence. He looked down at the table again, but this time not to gather himself. This time to think. Really think. Because what I had given him wasn't a solution. It was a boundary. And boundaries don't bend just because someone is uncomfortable standing in front of them. "You're asking me to carry all of it," he said finally. "I'm asking you not to hand it back to me," I replied. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. "You don't understand how much pressure I'm under." "I do," I said. "I just don't consider it my responsibility." That landed clean. He nodded once, but there was tension in it. "So that's it?" he asked. "I fix everything alone, and maybe, you decide later if I'm worth speaking to?" That's exactly it. No softness, no cushioning, just truth. He let out a quiet, almost humorless breath. "You've changed." "No," I said. "You just stopped seeing me clearly." Silence again. He looked around the room, slower this time. Not scanning, not searching, taking it in. The furniture, the small details, the things he'd grown up around but never really paid attention to. "This house," he said quietly. "You're staying here?" "Yes." "You're not downsizing? Moving somewhere easier?" "No." A pause. "I thought that was part of the plan." "I know you did." That one stayed between us for a second longer than the others, because it wasn't about the house. It was about assumption, control, future decisions made without me. "I had things lined up," he said, almost to himself. "Structures, timelines. It all made sense. For you." "Yes." That word came out heavier than he expected. He leaned forward again, but not in the same way as before. Not to push, not to take control, to understand. "I really thought I was doing the right thing," he said. I looked at him steadily. "No," I said. "You thought you were doing the profitable thing." That hit. Harder than anything else in this room, because it stripped away the last layer, the one he was still holding on to. "This wasn't just about money," he said. "It was enough about money," I replied. Silence. Long, unavoidable. Then he asked something different, something quieter. "What happens now?" Not what do I get, not how do I fix it, just what happens now? I folded my hands in my lap. "Now," I said, "you live with the outcome of what you chose." He nodded slowly. "And us?" he asked. I held his gaze. "That depends on what you do next." No elaboration, no reassurance, because there wasn't any to give. He sat there for another moment, then stood up. Not abruptly, not reluctantly, just decided. "I'll fix it," he said. Not to impress me, not to convince me, just stating it. I nodded once. "Good." He walked toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the handle. For a second, I thought he might say something else. Apologize again, explain, try to soften the edges one last time. But he didn't. He just opened the door and left. The house was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't about what had happened. It was about what hadn't. No shouting, no collapse, no dramatic ending. Just a line drawn and respected. I walked back to the table, adjusted the chair slightly, and sat down. Everything was in place, exactly where it should be, not because it stayed that way, but because I made sure it did. And for the first time since all of this began, there was nothing left to defend. A week passed, not dramatically, not with some grand shift in the world outside my windows, just time, steady, quiet, honest. The kind that reveals what remains after everything unnecessary falls away. Mitchell didn't come back. Not to argue, not to explain, not to ask again. But I heard things, not directly from him, never from him anymore, but from the edges where information tends to leak when pressure builds. Deals that didn't hold. Agreements that had to be renegotiated. Calls returned slower than they used to be. Nothing catastrophic, but nothing stable either. Exactly what happens when something is built too early, on something that was never yours. I didn't interfere. I didn't step in. Because this was his. My days settled into something cleaner, simpler, but not smaller. I kept the house exactly as it was, not out of stubbornness, but because nothing about it needed to change. Not for convenience, not for anyone else's version of what my life should look like. I adjusted what mattered, quietly, efficiently. I reviewed everything Sabine had structured, every layer, every protection. Not because I doubted it, but because understanding your own life is the only real form of control. I visited Clara again, not with documents this time, just tea, just conversation, just presence. And that, more than anything, confirmed I had done the right thing. Because the people who see you clearly, they don't need access to value you. One evening, I found myself back in the kitchen, slicing another blood orange. Same knife, same board, same precise movement. But something was different. Not outside. Inside. No tension left. No anticipation. No need to stay one step ahead of anything. Because there was nothing chasing me anymore. I finished, placed the slices on a plate, and carried them to the table. Sat down. And for the first time in all of this, I allowed myself to feel it fully. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Clarity. The kind that comes when you realize you didn't just protect your money. You protected your position in your own life. And that matters more than any number ever will. I stood up, took my plate to the sink, and rinsed it under warm water. The house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the kind of quiet that comes after something ends. It was the kind that stays. Because nothing is out of place anymore. Because nothing is being taken. Because nothing is being decided for you. I dried my hands, turned off the light, and paused for just a second before leaving the room. 76 years. And not once had I ever needed someone else to tell me who I was. I wasn't about to start now. I'll say it straight. She did it right. Clean, controlled, no noise. But me? I would have cut it off even earlier, the moment someone started building a version of me that wasn't true. Tell me in the comments, would you have waited or ended it immediately? And don't forget to subscribe and like if you understand why timing changes everything.